All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. It is my pleasure to introduce Cecilia Keelan today from our Cigna EAP. We're going to be talking about the power of authenticity. We're so happy to be able to bring these opportunities to our employees so that we can truly take steps to improve our mental and emotional well-being. So thank you so much for joining us, and I will leave it over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jane. Welcome, everybody. We have an awesome training today. I'm going to make myself smaller. There we go, so I don't stare at myself the whole time. We're going to talk today about authenticity, and there's a lot of power there. That's why we have the power of authenticity. We really know that throughout the ages, we've looked for what authenticity is. And it's been something that a lot of scientists and philosophers and artists have tried to figure it out. There's lines that we have like to shine thy own self, be true, right? And know thyself. And that's been passed down through centuries, and lots of movies and music and books, explore this thought of a theme of self-exploration and depicting character and getting rid of superficial life and finding really meaning and substance in our life. And these themes are great for the movies and entertainment, but the truth is we really want to be true to ourselves. And it doesn't require grand gestures or dramatic career changes or spontaneous moves across the world. Living an authentic life really can be as simple as some small everyday actions. We're going to be talking about those today that really reflect who we are, our passions, our values, our beliefs. And so today we're really going to unpack the idea of authenticity and how we can tap into that power for a better life, for a more fulfilling life, a more passionate and authentic life. So let's get started. All right, this is what we're going to explore today. We're going to talk about the definition and the benefits of being authentic. We're going to talk about how to learn more about your authentic self and reviews ways that we can be more of our true authentic self and feel comfortable bringing that out. And we're going to explore the role of authenticity and how it applies to work. And then I remind you of your great benefit through the Employee Assistance Program through Cigna that brought me here today. We'll do that at the end. Okay, so before we get started, we have to unpack what actually authenticity means in the first place. And so we wonder, how would we define that? Maybe it seems straightforward, but definitely people that study this concept have lots of different meanings and definitions. This one's from just the Webster Dictionary: being true to oneself's personality, spirit, or character, not being false or intimidating others. Imitating others, right? And so this doesn't really tell the whole story, really. Is it behavior that we're doing? Is it a feeling? Or is it just how we perceive ourselves or how we believe we perceive others? Some psychologists actually look at it and authenticity really as breaking the concept of self into the false and the true self. When we think of the false self, or the adaptive self. This is that outer layer that we present to the world, those masks that we sometimes have to put on. And it's how we get along with others, how we prioritize the things we feel we should be doing rather than maybe what we have to do, doing all the things we have to do versus the things that we want to do. And definitely has to go with some standards and expectations in that false world. And it's really what stops us on acting or voicing our true thoughts and beliefs and kind of keeping the peace or being polite, and preserving other people's feelings. And that adaptive self can be described as maybe a caretaker, somebody that's trying to take care of others, thinking of others before themselves, or the protector. Maybe somebody that feels like you don't want to get hurt, so we protect ourselves and we don't want to be rejected. Or we can be this obedient person, accommodating and doing what we need to be doing and accommodating everybody else, even though we maybe want to stand out in a crowd. We don't, because we can't be our authentic self. And so then we actually have to look at what it is that is our true self, right? How it is that we end up doing whatever we need to be doing, right? And so then we look at the true self being this part of being more self-aware. That adaptive role that we have is helpful in ways, right? Because it helps us to navigate all those expectations and things, all the stuff we have to do, right? But our authentic self, on the other hand, really doesn't have regard for those boundaries as much. Kind of think of it as like maybe the inner layer that we have. If we put it into something else, like a house, or that inner layer that has, the foundation for our house. And so if it's our body, it's our thoughts, our personality, our dreams, our goals, our passions, all of those. And be authentic self, we have to actually be self-aware of what's going on and where that self is, where that authentic true self is. And we need to be open and honest with what our authentic self-aware needs and what we want for ourselves. And we need to be sincere and honest and candid, leaving no room for interpretation of, really what we like and what we don't like. Who really houses our motivations, our true motivations, our core values, our beliefs about what's right and wrong. And most would really agree that we can't be our true authentic self all of the time. And if we did, we might hurt people's feelings or needlessly disagree with others, like friends and families and colleagues. But we have to realize that when your public image and your true inner self more closely match most of the time, then there's more congruence between your emotions and your thoughts and your behaviors. And we want to have those. And that helps you to be a more true, authentic person. But this sounds great, but we need to figure out how we do this in the real world. So let's see what it looks like. There's no really set way that we live an authentic life, and it's going to look different for everybody. And really, that's the point, because we all want to be our own true self. But those who we describe as being authentic, they do actually tend to have a couple patterns of qualities and attributes. And some of these may be internal, only felt by that person themselves, or they could be external, what other people see. So the internal piece of authenticity is accepting yourself as you are, not feeling like you have to put on false face or fake social media life or maintain a certain image. We want to accept ourselves as we are, and the good things. We've got a lot of good things. And we want to follow our heart's desire. You don't want to be afraid to take risks, because we know that life is about learning to negotiate balance between work and family and personal desires. And so we want to follow our heart's desire. People who are authentic internally also admit to mistakes, knowing that acknowledging those mistakes and those past mistakes actually makes space for healing and feeling renewed and able to have resolutions for things that we deal with in our head. And so especially those mistakes, which we could be pretty hard on ourselves. Internally, we want to be authentic about the value of understanding our mistakes and the gift that our mistakes can give us. And if we're internally authentic, we also know our strengths and our weaknesses. We have an accurate sense of really where our self is, as far as what we excel at, where we need to maybe improve, and commit to those areas of improvement to develop those. And so the other part is those external, the feeling and that we are being observed externally and being felt in our relationship with our peers, our colleagues, our family, our friends, even complete strangers can see this external authenticity that we can have. Ways we do that is we show our emotions. We show our emotions and letting people see what makes us happy, what makes us upset, and all that's in between. And it shows what the real you is. And so we show those emotions, and we don't want to feel shame for our emotions. We also want to respond openly and honestly when it's courteous and respectful and important to do so. We want to make sure that we can look at that and be external with that openness and that honesty. And you stand behind your beliefs, and you want others to know where you stand. Also, we want to boldly express our personality and passions and beliefs and let those come out. You have the confidence then, when we're authentic externally, to go against the grain if we need to. And you're confident and passionate about your beliefs, even if they're under scrutiny. And we also act with sincerity when we are externally authentic. People believe what you say because your actions align with what you're talking about. So, as you see on this slide, authenticity isn't really just a thing that you are working on accomplishing or a skill that you can master. It spans emotions, behaviors, perceptions, and ultimately really boils down to a sense of conscious choices that allow you to live more presently and the understanding of your true self and allowing that person to be out there. And that's what we really want. So, why is this important? What if my true self is maybe shy or prefers to be alone? Is it better to stifle those impulses and strive for the things that we think lead to success, like an outgoing personality, for example, even if you don't have those qualities? The research shows that that's really not the case, but that's what we think about, right? So we're gonna dispel that myth, right? It really has to do with some great positive benefits of being authentic. It's really one that we want to be thinking about why it can be helpful, not just the fears of how other people see us and see our real selves. There's studies with participants online and their behavior online, which shows that those who have social media posts that reflect their self perceptions and their personalities in an authentic way actually show higher levels of happiness and life satisfaction. And so, if we're going to use social media, let's be authentic. This is true whether or not that personality that we're considered is socially desirable or not, like extroverted versus introverted or gregarious versus shy. It doesn't matter. They can have higher happiness and life satisfaction, most likely because we're accepting ourselves and we're bringing that positive piece to it. There's also studies that have linked authenticity with greater self esteem and motivation to pursue your goals and keep moving in a direction in your life. So, when we're authentic, we may have a roadmap and we may be motivated to keep walking down that. And research has shown that when we're more authentic, it leads us to having more healthy relationships, more positive and satisfying relationships with other people. And in close romantic relationships, when we perceive our partner as being authentic and knowing their own true self, that's also linked to studies saying that people are feeling better and more satisfied in their relationship, their romantic relationship. We also have found that authenticity is linked to a higher likelihood of engaging with others and social activities and motivated to do things like volunteering, donating time or money to charities, expressing gratitude to others, more likely to do these pre-social activities that are really enriching in our life. And the research also shows that having a positive relationship, when we can feel like we can have that positive relationship in ourselves with authenticity, and feeling good generally about ourselves, might not be surprising to say that that's also linked to less stress and anxiety and depression symptoms. And so that's really good too. We could use a little bit of that. So we don't really know exactly how this works and how it is associated with those positive outcomes, but the conclusion is clear with all of this research. Feeling that your thoughts and actions align with your true, authentic self pays dividends. And so we want to be able to do that, but we know it's kind of hard. So let's talk about why it's hard to put this into practice. All sounds great, but when we think about trying to live really authentically, it can be a lot harder than it sounds. Easier said than done, right? And so there are a lot of obstacles that might stand in our way, and some barriers that may be ingrained in our childhood or developed over time. And so some things that we know that are barriers to being authentic is having difficulty showing emotions. Maybe you're naturally shy or reserved, or you grew up in a family culture that didn't really encourage expressing emotions. Perhaps you experienced some negative consequences for showing your emotions, maybe when you were younger at school or at work or at your home life. And so when we have those kind of situations, it's hard for us to feel like we can show our emotions. There's also a discomfort with going against the grain. We can have that difficulty with maybe not doing what everybody else is doing, and that feels a little bit difficult to be authentic when it doesn't feel like other people are in the same boat, right? When we're going against the grain, and we can also lack confidence and fear of being vulnerable. If we've maybe grown up with a message that says it's desirable maybe to fit in, and then that's reinforced by social media and social norms and our culture and advertising. When we think about maybe trying to stand out, it can feel like we're worried about embarrassment or shame, or it makes us vulnerable to ridicule or someone judging us. And that can really stifle our confidence with being our true self. We also worry about some consequences of showing our true self. Maybe someone's going to judge us or reject us, or there's going to be some other consequences. If they know the real you, maybe what if they don't like what they see? And so we worry about that. Or there's legitimate fears that of negative consequence of us really pursuing our true passions and voicing our beliefs. And in the age of social media that we live in, there can be a significant pressure to kind of project a certain image of ourselves and touch up our image and make sure we've got the great sound bites, and that desire to just kind of keep up with others can be a real barrier in embracing our authentic self when it comes to not really fitting that mold. We really want to make sure that we're understanding. We want to think about feeling inauthentic, right? And when the research talks about feeling inauthentic, they have it linked with psychologically feeling uncomfortable, dissonance, depression, even exhaustion. And those really, that feeling that what I'm doing is in aligning with our beliefs, and that can really make us feel like we don't know where to go next, and feeling at a loss, which can lead to some depression symptoms and some lack of motivation to do anything different. That's why this is hard. But we're going to be talking about some ways for us to be able to live authentically, even though there are those barriers, even though it's hard. I really love this quote from Carl Jung. He's, one of our gods of psychology, right? So he says, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. So we really want to be thinking about that. We want to think about maybe moments in our life that were meaningful for you. Maybe a night out with great friends, or a compliment from someone you care about and that you respect, or just dinner with your family. These are the degrees of the real you in these moments, and your authentic self. This is when we were. And in these moments, you remember those and you remember what made them special. And that can actually help us when we review those to maybe work on a journey of being more authentic, because we were able to be there and we have those memories for that. And so we're going to talk about for the rest of our time today how we do this, how we get started. So authenticity begins with what seems kind of obvious, right? Getting to know yourself, but that's kind of hard, right? It can be a lengthy process. It requires us to be thoughtful and curious and really approach knowing ourselves in all different areas a little bit better. So when we think about knowing ourselves, we know that we have all these other pieces to it. And we've got some great handouts that you guys are going to get in your email after our session. And one of them is getting to know your authentic self. That's the name of it. And that's actually a nice little guide to kind of learning about these different areas that are on your slide and how to bring in that authentic self. So we want to be doing things like asking why. Not asking why, but asking what, right? We want to ask what. When examining your real, true inner experience, we want to stay away from the why. Why did I snap at my friend? Why was I so happy back then? Because the research shows that asking why makes you more of a tendency to invent reasons behind your feelings that may not be true, maybe what you think they should be. So instead, we focus on what. What made me sad? What made me angry? What made me happy today? And then when we answer those questions, that can be a great way for us to get started. So check out the handout when you get it. We also want to consider outside perspectives. Other people can provide more clear, objective window into ourselves, especially people that really know us and that care about us, right? So maybe we can ask family or friends or colleagues, when you seem at your best, what do they see? What are your biggest strengths Do they see some weaknesses that you could work on? What do they appreciate about you? And sometimes people give us a window into this, and we kind of blow those off, those compliments and things like that. From today on, part of our journey is taking those in, hearing what other people's perspectives are about us. We remember the negative ones, but do we really take in the positive ones? We want to make sure we're doing that. And other people's perspective can give you some valuable cues on what that outward behavior, that external authenticity is. And does it jive with your true self? We always want to ask ourselves that. And then we also can cultivate a mindful mindset. We know about mindfulness, right? That simply means being present in the moment, not getting caught up in our racing thoughts about the past or about the future, and fully being aware of what's going on right now and accepting that without judging it or without labeling it. That's mindfulness in kind of a little package. And so when we have a mindful mindset, it helps you to stop and notice your responses and your internal experience that you're having in any type of situation. And it helps us to accept them without judgment, and helps us to learn kind of what's going on with those deeper feelings and maybe what our needs are. Because once we know our deeper feelings and our needs, we can both express and reinforce some healthy boundaries with others in order to be our authentic self. And that's a really great piece. Another great handout in your packet is mindfulness practice for authenticity. And that has some exercises for you to do to really get started on that mindful mindset. And as you do the work of the self-reflection, like it says down at the bottom, you might learn some things about yourself that really don't resonate maybe with your ideal image. And we want to understand that that's okay. That's part of this journey. And it really sets the stage for the next step of your journey, and we want to be able to understand that and not get bogged down by that maybe moment of our self-reflection. We want to use it as tools for helping us keep walking down our path for our journey. So as we learn more about ourselves, the good and the bad, right, and everything in between, that self-acceptance becomes a key component in becoming more authentic. And so you can't truly embrace your authentic self if you can't accept imperfection. Yep. So it's a big piece of it, right? We are all imperfect. We all make mistakes, and we need to accept that in ourselves. And sometimes we feel pressure that the other people around us put upon us to be perfect. But nobody can live up to that image. There's no ceiling for perfection. And so we can always work toward accepting some imperfections in our life. And so we've got a few ideas here. First, we already talked about learning from our mistakes. We've all said and done things that we wish we hadn't, and we don't want these moments to define us. These are not moments just to be ashamed of. These are moments of learning and opportunity, both of the person that you are and the person that you're aspiring to be, in that authentic self that we're trying to find. I call them my cringe moments, where I wish I wouldn't have done that. But then I take a deep breath and say, what have I learned from this? Or what do I do different every time now, from now on, because of learning from my mistakes? So we don't stay in that cringe moment of just remembering that we screwed up, right? We want to take that ownership of the past mistakes that we've had, identify what we've learned, and allow ourselves to move forward. So if you want to take my cringe thing that I think I made up, even though I think there's books, and I never write a book because I never know what I made up myself and what I've learned along the way. But this one I know, because I think of stuff and I go, but I want to stay in that place. Breathe and say, what have I learned? What can I learn from this? Where's the opportunity? Where's the gift? There's always a gift in mistakes. And there's always that old saying that says, best way we learn is through our mistakes. So we want to be able to do that, accepting that imperfection. And then we want to tap into that power of vulnerability. Brené Brown is a expert in vulnerability, and she talks about the power of vulnerability. And so we often try to avoid feeling vulnerable because it can lead to feelings of shame, anxiety, fear, nervousness, right? When we feel vulnerable, right? It kind of makes our heart skip a beat. But Brené Brown encourages us to take vulnerability and reframe it, not as a weakness, but as an act of courage. Take small steps toward some vulnerability, and then share your honest thoughts, maybe with somebody that you care about. What it was like to be vulnerable. What happened? Did that worst thing, that catastrophic thought that you had, actually happen when you allowed yourself to be vulnerability? Nope, it didn't. So we want to take that in. Be proud of yourself when you take those risks, because you're opening the door to being just a little bit more real and more authentic, getting closer and closer. So you want to tap into that vulnerability. And Brene Brown is just a phenomenal person when it talks about really empowering in a lot of her books, being able to notice that power of vulnerability and move through it. Perfect one to check out. I love her books. Another way to accept imperfection is to practice forgiveness of yourself and of others. So when we learn to embrace realistic expectations about ourselves and about others, we're able to make conscious choices about forgiving ourselves, forgiving others for past mistakes and disappointments. And practicing compassion and understanding really allows you to let go of those past grudges that can really lock in some negative thinking and attitudes about you or someone else. And we want to accept that perfection is not an attainable goal, both for you and for others. And don't forget, when we forgive someone for a wrongdoing, we're not condoning their behavior. We're releasing ourselves of holding on to that grudge, holding on to that pain and that suffering. We all could use a little less suffering, right? So this can be part of almost the hardest part of the journey, because we all want to do well. We all want to be perfect, whatever that is. But ultimately, it has such huge payoffs. And Brene Brown's research actually shows that those who have higher levels of feeling love and belonging were willing to put themselves out there and be vulnerable and take those risks, because they believe that they're worthy of that love, despite being an imperfect person. There's a book called The Gifts of Imperfection. It's a great one to check out. So once you have a good understanding of your strengths, your weaknesses, your thoughts and your emotions, your passions, your values, your beliefs, now it's time to kind of embrace it and start to express it, because that's who you are. That's what we understand about ourselves. And it can feel really risky, again, to show our true selves, but let's start small. Start doing it in small ways, meaningful ways, to maybe those people that we trust and love and we know love them. And that's going to be kind of like fire drills we can do to give you some practice of putting this authenticity into action and making it easier to do, maybe more as a norm as we practice rather than the exception, just like anything that we try to practice. Some ways to practice is to show your personality. You don't have to change your personality. You don't have to be outgoing or extroverted to express yourself with confidence and poise. We want to be able to feel natural. What feels natural for you or comfortable? Don't try to be the person you think you should be. We want to be that person that we've figured out that we are. So we want to share humor with others. We want to display our hobbies in our home or in our workspace. We show others our real you and what that's like. And that's a really great way to get started for being on this journey once we're self-aware. And we also want to be open with our views and our passions and our beliefs when it feels safe and is appropriate to do so. You want to let other people know what you believe in, what you stand for, and where you stand on issues that are important to you. And at the same time, we honor others' authenticity by being respectful of their views as well. And that's another big piece of it, is we want to notice other people's authenticity and really give them that best judgment and that best expression, and you let them know it's okay to be vulnerable because you're respecting their authenticity also. And we use our best judgment in determining the right time and space for this kind of openness. So that's another big piece of it. And share our feelings openly. For some, it's really easy to share your feelings, and for others, it can feel really confusing and really vulnerable and a little scary to be open. But we want to remove any pretenses on how we live or interact with others. We just decide to own it. And even if we're afraid or angry or happy or sad or having any other emotions, we want to be able to accept those and share those, because that allows us to learn about what makes us struggle and when we're at our best. It helps us with those weaknesses and those strengths, and then we can understand them and decide what to do about those. And of course, while being open and honest is an important part of living authentically, it's important that your honesty and your openness doesn't cross the territory of being rude or disrespectful or dismissive of others with their own passions and authenticity. This is where your adaptive self can play a role. Remember that. we're choosing the right approach in certain situations. And we want to really try to strike a balance between honest self-exploration and being conscientious and courteous toward others. So that's a balance. It can be tough, but we want to be able to try to put that in there. So part of accepting ourselves as who and where we are is accepting also that we have limits. All have points at which things are not fulfilling anymore, and maybe now it's more of an obligation. And of course, there's times that we're going to have obligations that we have to do things we'd rather not do, of course. But it's important to enforce healthy boundaries, to honor our true needs, our true wishes, and our true values and passions. So we have to know what those limits are. So when your day is filled with requests from everybody else, it's easy to neglect the tasks and activities that are actually meaningful for us. And it's easy to spiral into feeling inadequate or become burnt out because we're doing everything for everyone else. We're letting down ourselves. And we actually usually pull in that we're letting down other people when we get to that point. So we want to recognize the signs that maybe you've gotten to your limit, that you've had enough. What is it? Do you get short-tempered? Do you get frazzled? Do you get anxious? Do you get tense? Do you start being snippy? You want to notice what happens in your mind and your body, both. Because that's going to be cues for you to be able to know where your limits are and be able to reinforce those with healthy boundaries. When we talk about healthy boundaries, we also talk about learning to say no when we reach those limits. So we learn those limits and then we learn to say no. We want to ask yourself if there's a request that's coming in, is it something that you feel you should do or something that you actually want to do? If it's a should do, we want to consider if it's related to any of our core values that you could identify in that self-reflection that you already did on your journey. And if so, you can weigh whether or not you have the time, resources, capacity to fulfill that request. So there's a couple things we talk about when we're wanting to evaluate learning to say no. And if they're not there, then we need to say no, because that's going to alleviate some stress and difficulty for doing things that you don't need to do or you don't want to do. And maybe that obligation feels like it's coming from others and others' boundaries, others' values, passions, and beliefs. And if we can say no to honor ourselves, we need to be able to learn to say no. And then we have to replace that guilt with self-acceptance. Sometimes when we say no, it can leave somebody else hurt or disappointed, which can rise some guilt and shame because we didn't do what they wanted. We disappointed someone. But we always have to remember that when we feel guilt, we have to remember if we did something wrong. And so saying no or declining an invitation or something isn't doing something wrong. That person just is disappointed. So we want to replace that guilt with self-acceptance, knowing that you're being your true, authentic self to what your needs and wants are, and unfortunately they just don't match with that other person. And remind yourself that it's okay to honor yourself in this way, and that you need to prioritize what matters and what's important to you right now. So we want to replace that guilt. I often talk about replacing the word that you feel guilty when you haven't done something wrong, to change it to thinking, I just wish it was different. I wish I could say yes, but I needed to say no. And that's a powerful way to look at that. So knowing and communicating your limits can give you some space to focus on the things that you need and your wants and needs, your hobbies, your passions. And maybe they've been neglected for a little bit because maybe we've been taking care of everybody else. And so that opens up that space. And when we reconnect with the things that we're passionate about, it's really a next step in being more authentic, because those things are good for us and healthy and happy for ourselves. So we want to be doing that, and that helps us be more authentic. So we need to live in the moment also. As adults with so many responsibilities and expectations that we have to meet, it's easy to get carried away with the thoughts of the future or the past or worst case scenario or catastrophic thinking. And this tendency really diminishes our capacity to focus on our own thoughts and our own emotions and our own desires in favor of what other people might want to happen instead. And so it's important to live in the moment and stay present and aware of what it is that you may need and be intentional to sit down with those feelings. And so how do we do that? We have to pursue those passions and those strengths and those dreams in order to stay in the moment. We need to invest some time into those activities that feel meaningful because it helps you actually feel more purposeful, more energized, and we feel good when we're our true self. So you want to ask yourself, what truly matters to me? What are your hopes and what are your dreams? What do you want to get better at doing? What do you think is missing in your life right now? And maybe you incorporate those. Once we identify those, and we could live in that moment, and we can maybe incorporate them in our life every day in small pieces to reclaim that self, that authentic self, and that true self. And then you want to discover what makes you happy, because sometimes we can lose touch with the things that bring us joy and happiness. And so do some investigating. Try to remember what brought you joy as a child or a young adult or a teenager. What did you most enjoy the last week, month, or year? On vacation, at work, just hanging out at home. Think about those moments and how those moments may have brought you joy and contentment in the past. What were you doing? How can you bring that to the present and live in the moment? Who were you with? How can you recreate that feeling today? We want to discover what makes you happy, and maybe we have to search a little bit for it, but look in your past and try to figure out what was going on there, and can we recreate it? And practicing gratitude is a big piece of feeling more authentic. When we focus our attention on what we're grateful for, we begin to make connections within that authentic self, what we value, what's important to us, and what we need from others, because we live in a world with everybody else. And so when we express gratitude, it takes us a step further, allowing us to express those values and those needs in the form of appreciation and humanity and love for others. And so the practicing can be as simple as practicing daily gratitude, like a journal, or writing 3 things down that you're grateful for. Maybe before the end of your day or at the start of your day. We definitely know that this is a strategy that's been around for a long time because it's in parenting books, where you lay your kids down for bed, and there's a parenting strategy that says, ask them what made you happy today, what are you thankful for today, what was the best parts of your day, what are 3 of them, and let's talk about them before we go to bed. And so we do that in parenting because it starts to create that positivity where we have kids looking for things to express their gratitude. They know tonight mom or dad is going to ask, because we do this with our bedtime routine. What if we did that with our bedtime routine or our morning routine? Maybe we can practice that gratitude that can make us feel more on top of things. It feels good. Maybe to just send a thank you text to a friend, to a colleague. It feels good. It feels good for them, and it feels good for us. So practicing gratitude really helps us feel more authentic, because in order to feel that thankfulness and that gratitude, we have to really look at the situation, and we have to look at how we're feeling, truly feeling. So it really does help us to be more authentic. So there's another great handout called Facing Your Truth, like on our slide today, and we could have take some time to really look at those. And we want to realize that there's areas of our life that we have a hard time being as authentic as we'd like to be, and we could be a little more authentic. And so these areas really need a little bit more honest thinking and concentration in order to begin to shift toward more of that authenticity. And so we're going to be introspective, and it begins with asking yourself some questions. And again, we got a great handout that really has a way, kind of a workbook or a work page for you to work on these. First, we need to identify the gaps between that public face and our authentic self. Think of the areas of your life and the roles we have to play within them, like with work, family, relationships. When are you the most yourself, and when can you least be able to be yourself? And who are you with in these situations, and what are you doing? So when we explore that and identify those gaps, that's going to help us to really pin down those areas of vulnerability, because we need to do that. Because again, when we act inauthentically, it's often due to vulnerability aspects or these underlying fears that come up. So you want to ask yourself, what do you fear people might be thinking or saying about your true self? We want to really think about that. For example, when you pretend to agree with somebody, like a friend, when your real opinion does differ, this may be an attempt to fit in, maybe that adaptive or that false self. So you might fear that someone views you as ignorant or that they won't like you anymore, or want to be around you anymore. And these fears may reveal that you have more of a people pleasing tendency, or maybe a feeling of inadequacy, or a habit of devaluing your own opinions and your own beliefs and values. And so these are areas of vulnerability that can impact our emotions and our behavior in many situations. And we use our strengths, and that can offset that fear and those vulnerabilities. And then we want to consider what we would like to change. And then we have to make a plan to make it happen. Can you address these areas where you've identified that vulnerability? And in our example, maybe it's speaking up about your true beliefs, realizing that this person is a true friend and that it's okay because of our great relationship, that we can have this open conversation and not going to be judging you, even if you have different views. And we're doing it in a very respectful and keeping everyone's dignity, not being mean or angry or saying mean words. It's being assertive about where you're coming from too. So that person did it, and so then this is a close friend. So then we can bring ours, and maybe we're being more about what we need. Maybe we're going to be more assertive about giving ourselves alone time. Maybe we're a people pleaser and we're always with other people. And so maybe we give priority to us having some alone time. Or the opposite. Maybe we need to be proactive to spend time with others, like family and friends. And how would we make these changes a reality? We really need to move to that next step of how we're going to do that. So we identify it and we face our truths. So these are the questions we want to ask ourselves. How do we do this? What happens in these situations? And how are we fearful? That's going to help us face our truths. And so before we close, we want to just review one setting that sometimes we can find it hard to be our true self, and that's at work, right? Because it can be tricky to navigate authenticity at work where there's tasks and responsibilities that may or may not be congruent with your beliefs, your passions, your strengths, the things we talked about, but they're largely outside of our control. So that makes it a little bit different ballgame. But you can still honor your true self at work also. Here's some of the ways to think about it. You want to incorporate that authenticity in small ways. Maybe decorating your office space with some things that are important to you. Maybe it's in your hairstyle or your attire within, of course, the company's dress code. Maybe asking for more projects or tasks that really play to your strengths. That could be a great way to do that. So this authenticity can, in these small everyday actions and choices, it doesn't necessarily require major changes. You don't have to change jobs to achieve that or move to a different department. We can start small and just showing ourselves at work, and especially if we have people that we feel could honor that, right, at work. And maybe there are people that may not honor that, but if we have some other people that honor that, then let's start in small ways. And we also want to look for those opportunities that we can connect with others. We want to be able to reach out to like-minded colleagues who maybe share your values and interests and passions. We sometimes find them through employee resource groups or networking opportunities within the organization or social media working sites. And when we connect with others who share our interests, it allows ourselves to be our authentic self because we're on common ground. And then we can do maybe our day-to-day job duties that allow you to have that opportunity. And we look for those opportunities to connect. And if we don't ever talk about our self and our passions and our interests and the things that are important to us or what we did this weekend, then we're not going to have those opportunities. So maybe we start there. And own your accomplishments at work. When we display our achievements, we feel like we can run that risk of something known as imposter syndrome, right? When we feel that self-doubt and that incompetence prevailing despite this legitimate experience and education and successes and accomplishments. That imposter syndrome makes you feel fake, feels like your false self, not your authentic self. Like your achievements were just kind of out of luck or not your hard work or something else. So we want to own our accomplishments and give ourselves credit for the strength and integrity and ingenuity that was needed to get ourselves to this successful accomplishment. And that's what got you there. So we want to really own that and bring that in, and that's going to motivate us to keep going. We all know when we accomplish something that when it isn't recognized by ourselves or others, it feels meh, right? But we can do that ourselves. We can actually neutralize good things when we need to be celebrating them. We really want to own those accomplishments at work. And embrace a growth mindset, knowing who you are and what you're good at and what you're interested in really sets up for development in the areas that need to progress your career and maybe need to be addressed also. So look for maybe stretch projects that maybe outside of your box. Pursue training in areas of interest. And that can really be helpful in growth mindset and saying, I can do more. I can do it with maybe some different things that could really bring out my authentic self. And so knowing and acknowledging that true self doesn't mean that you have to be stagnant, but it really does give you kind of a firm foundation for that growth mindset and that development for the areas that are meaningful for you. And it also, when we can have that growth mindset, it also can help us to feel more confident and more motivated to deal with some of the weaknesses or the ones that aren't in our strength categories and try to develop those, because we look at that as growth. We look at that as something that could be really great rather than something that says, oh, I'm just looking at my weaknesses and now I feel bad about myself because I do have weaknesses. We all have weaknesses. We all have strengths. So we want to be able to use those to help with our vulnerabilities and to help with us at work and to bring out that true authentic self. I'd like to kind of end us today in a simple message that I hope you received this whole time I've been talking throughout our training. You are enough. You don't owe the world more than you are, because who you are is a vulnerable human being, right? Just like everybody else. So you want to give yourself the permission to be that person, to know that you're worthy of love and acceptance, just the way that you are. And it has to start with us accepting who we are and the way that we are. We want to be bold and brave and courageous in facing those fears and let go of those self-doubts and let yourself just be you in this moment, because we want to be able to do that, because it makes us feel more healthy, happy, and confident. And here's Brene Brown again with a great quote. Authenticity is a collection of choices that we have to make every day. It's about the choice to show up and to be real. It's a choice to be honest. It's a choice to let our true selves to be seen. I think that says quite a bit about really what we talked about today and about being able to be authentic, be able to move through those fears and that vulnerability and a comfort feeling, to be able to still show our true self and notice what happens when we do. Often people will respond in kind. Often people will respond with their authentic self, and then we both are feeling more comfortable and less vulnerable and more able to take on any challenge that comes to us, because we can be our real self. We can have that internal self that allows us to be me and to be real. And we want to be able to do that. And we have to define and go on that journey of who I am. Who is me? What is that? And so if we do that, that's going to really help us to motivate, right? We're going to notice those weaknesses and those places where we can do a little bit of work, but we also want to notice all of those strengths that we have and how it feels to be knowing ourselves and accepting ourselves just the way that we are, and how that really enriches our life. And as I said before, we open up to questions, and start jumping in the chat box if you're thinking about anything, because we'll do Q&A in a minute. Just want to remind you of your great benefit that you have through the Employee Assistance Program. It's such a great benefit, and we kind of forget about it because we don't have to pay for it and sign up for it every year at open enrollment. You got this employee benefit, the EAP Employee Assistance Program, the first day that you started. So it's got face-to-face sessions. Those are 6 sessions per topic per year. So I'm going to take a moment just to explain it because it's kind of confusing. So let's say that maybe I motivated you to access a counselor and you want to work on maybe stress management. So today you get an authorization for stress management. And maybe while you're using your 6 sessions, then you notice that you could work on some work-life balance. And so we get another set of 6 sessions to work specifically on work-life balance. And maybe during that, it's come up that maybe there could be some help with your parenting. Maybe you have a teenager and that's tough. And so then we do some parenting. And maybe we want to bring our spouse along. And it's a household benefit, so your spouse has their own set of 6 sessions. So then we have 12 sessions to do maybe some couples counseling regarding ourselves as a couple or our children. And then I don't even know what number we're at this point, maybe 24. And then 12 months from today, you could get a new authorization to revisit that stress management. So that's how that per topic, per year works. And in the world we're in, it could be face-to-face or it could be telemedicine. That could be over the telephone or over video. And just so you know, Zoom, like you guys have, the work Zoom is not the same Zoom that we have at home for free because all of us companies, including counselors, have purchased a HIPAA-compliant Zoom. So you don't have to worry about Zoom bombing if you access face-to-face sessions and they're doing Zoom. Fully confidential, fully prepaid. The theory of EAP is what happens in an employee's life in and outside of work can affect work. So if we give resources that people don't have to worry about the financial piece, then everybody wins because then you can be focused and concentrating at work well and not worrying about home or just being able to be at work more because we're not worrying about home because we have this benefit to help with that. The telephone number for the EAP ends up being a crisis line because it's answered 24/7. So if something happens in the middle of the night, you have a place to call to get some resources. Then again, it's a household benefit. So unlike health insurance, it doesn't matter how old people are, your dependents, doesn't matter if people are related to you. So it could be roommates or somebody renting from you. What happens in your house is your household. And so the EAP theory goes to that. So even kiddos off in college are still part of the household. So if they're struggling states away, you can get them some counseling and some assistance. And then work-life support and convenience services. You can think about this in anything that you've spent all day on your computer and now I got to go home and do some research for my dog, for my kid, for my house, for my travel plans. They can do that research for you and send you an email within a day. And if you need it sooner, they'll send it to you within hours. You get to determine that. So if you need a plumber, if you're going on vacation, you want to know what's going on in the area. If you need to find a neurologist for Aunt Sue who lives states away, they can do that research for you. And they vet all those. They make sure that the contact information is available. Sometimes with childcare, they'll even see if there's openings. So they're really vetting those. So that's a good resource for you. And you could be doing something else rather than hanging out on your computer again. And finally, there is free 30-minute consultations with financial professionals and with attorneys. So what I always say, instead of going downtown and paying $300 to meet with an attorney to find out you don't need to retain an attorney for your legal issue, let's go through the EAP for free. And if you do want to retain that financial person or that attorney, you get 25% off of their regular rates. And remember on the financial side for next year that you can do your taxes with 25% off if you go through the EAP for the financial one. So if you pay for your taxes and you don't get 25% off, you may want to go through the EAP. All right, I'm going to open up the references so that you guys can see the great references that we have. And I'm going to open up the chat box and see what's going on. Okay, here's a question. Excuse me. What do you suggest when people are not in a place to feel safe being their true self? I'm thinking of like online sexual orientation or some of those others. That's a great question because that means that we need to probably look at our authentic self and understand our authentic self. And then we want to understand when it is appropriate. That's kind of when we talked about when it's appropriate to be our authentic self. It can be tough, right? And do we understand ourself, like our sexual orientation at this moment? And are we willing to take that risk of vulnerability that somebody else might make a judgment about how we are and what we're expressing as far as ourselves? And if we've gotten to the point of feeling that we accept ourselves and we're embracing ourselves, then we're able to possibly feel like, okay, well, this person isn't a support in the way that I am acting and behaving, in the way that I want my life to be. And so maybe that tells you, right? There's difficult people everywhere. And so sometimes when we do have to be authentic and have that vulnerability, sometimes people will misuse that. Maybe because they are not being their authentic self. And could we change that narrative to feel sad for them that they haven't found their authentic self? And that's why maybe they're being judgmental of me. Maybe we look at it that, take it out of us, and put it back on them without necessarily a judgment. And maybe that feels like a judgment. It's an observation and a question that we have. And a judgment would be going a little bit further to, well, they don't like people like this, and therefore they're a terrible person. So we know when that's a judgment versus an observation. They might not be able to understand vulnerability or to understand this, and that's okay. I still am understanding that within myself. It's a tricky one. It's absolutely a tricky one. Main thing is when we feel comfortable being vulnerable and being our authentic self, we don't want maybe others that are not in the space of embracing where they are, and maybe not in the place of embracing where you are, that we don't want that to stop us from being that authentic self. That's why we start small with the people that we love and we know love us and care about us, because it helps us to build that confidence for when there are going to be those critics out there. There are going to be those shamers out there. There are going to be those people out there that are difficult. And we want to be able to move through those with our mindfulness. Well, this is a situation that wasn't enjoyable, but I'm not in it anymore. That's the past. And not everybody can be their true authentic self, and maybe I hope for that for them in the future. That's a tough question, but a really important one, and so we have to navigate through that one.
Yeah, thank you so much. I know we're running out of time a little bit here, so I don't want to cut you off. I did want to make sure that you saw in the chat, we have a flyer on the EAP specific to the county. We actually have our 800 number is the same as our customer service number for your medical plan, your dental plan, your online coaching. All of our Pinellas County stuff is on the same phone number, is on the back of your card. So there's a flyer for your reference. And we are so lucky to have Lorelei Keefe. She is an on-site Cigna EAP counselor. She is new to the county this year. Her office is housed at 400 South Fort Harrison and is available to anybody in your household for EAP. She's here 19 hours a week. The link is to her webpage, and you'll see her bio and her office and her contact information. And she really is amazing. So I just want to make sure you were aware of that resource.
Great. You guys are lucky for sure to have an on-site person. That's wonderful. Take advantage of that.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. You have a wonderful day, and thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.